Yo 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 everybody, it's the one and only Willy Oli, and today I'm going to be talking about my experience overclocking with Ryzen. AMD's Ryzen series of chips have proven to be very groundbreaking for a number of reasons. The first of which is that they're the first 6 and 8 core processors to be marketed for the mainstream and priced as such. But the second reason is because they are all unlocked and overclocking ready. And that's what this video is about. It's about what it's like to overclock a Ryzen chip, the good and the bad. Let's start with the hardware I'm using. My CPU is a Ryzen 5 1500X on an Asus TUF Gaming B350M Plus motherboard with the latest drivers. The CPU is being cooled with a Noctua NHD15 SEAM4, and the cooler is more than overkill and should not hold the chip back in any way. The RAM I'm using is an 8GB kit of DDR4 dual-channel LPX Vengeance memory, overclocked to 2800 MHz. I use the stress test feature on CPU-Z and 3 consecutive runs of Cinebench R15 to stability test the overclock. I use a combination of the Ryzen Master software and the BIOS to tune my overclocks. I like to use the Ryzen Master software because it is easier to use, and sometimes it will let me put my overclocks in and I won't have to restart my computer. It will just automatically apply these things. However, if you're using the Ryzen Master software, be aware that if you find an overclock you're comfortable with, you'll then have to key it into the BIOS manually if you want to use that overclock permanently. The first thing I did was see how far my CPU could go on stock voltage. For my chip, the performance jump was about 300 MHz, or max speed on all cores of 3.8 GHz. This is one of Ryzen's strong suits, the fact that it is very power efficient and that all chips can achieve a 3.7 to 3.8 GHz clock speed on all cores on the stock voltage of 1.325 volts. Even chips with a very low base clock speed, like my friend's Ryzen 7 1700, whose base clock is only 3 GHz, can be overclocked to 3.7 on stock voltage. The overclocking with low voltages is great for using the stock thermal solution. The stock AMD fan, actually I have it right here. Since this is a 95 watt TDP, and this comes with most Ryzen coolers, you can actually get some good overclocking headroom out of this. Then I tried to push my CPU further. I could achieve 3.9 GHz at 1.3 volts, no problem. But after that, I struggled to get my CPU any further. I discovered that it was a very begrudging overclocker, and trying to get 4 GHz was nearly impossible. I needed 1.45 volts to maintain a stable 4 GHz overclock, and even though the CPU never got that hot, it only stayed around 69 to 70 degrees with 4 GHz, I decided that was too much, and turned the overclock back down to 3.9. I've been content to run that for about the past month. I was well aware that anything beyond 4 GHz was unlikely at best, but I was still very disappointed to learn that my 1500X chip could not handle 4 GHz well. Obviously, high clock speeds aren't what Ryzen is about. Ryzen is about providing a large number of power-efficient cores and threads. And it does that well, especially when it comes to power efficiency. For the past month I've run my CPU at 3.9 GHz with only 1.3 volts, a far cry from the necessary 1.45 for just 100 MHz more. So if you're looking for just a small performance gain, or you have a Ryzen chip like the 1700 with a very low base clock, you can get a lot of mileage out of a very small or even no voltage bump. And I think that's why all Ryzen chips are unlocked. Not so that you can push tons of voltage through them, but rather so that you can get a small performance gain with little to no power increase, and with that little to no heat increase as well. Quickly before I go, I want to mention something odd that happened. When I was testing my 4 GHz overclock, I was running a stress test at 1.45 volts and 4 GHz. In the CPU-Z multi-threaded stress test, I was scoring higher than a 7700K. In fact, I was getting a score multiple hundred points higher than I'd ever achieved. And this was really weird because I was scoring more than a quad-core chip with 8 threads, the same as mine, running at 4.2 GHz. So I looked at Task Manager, it was showing 4.4. I'm not sure what this is. Maybe it had to do with XFR, maybe this wasn't a real thing. I don't know, Ryzen Master was still showing only 4 gigahertz, so maybe it was a fluke. And of course, like most UFO sightings, I don't have much evidence for this. I only have one screenshot. I've been unable to replicate this again.